Welcome back. I'm Roger Stone, joined by my colleague Owen Scheuer, and you are here at the War Room. This is the expanded programming mandated by Alex Jones, and we are on our way to a day when we have round-the-clock InfoWars, but today we're now standing at great live programming at almost 10 hours a day, so you never need to be without your InfoWars fix. Joining me now is a man that I have come to respect as a true Renaissance man. He is not only a brilliant writer and researcher, author of his own books, but he is also a singer, songwriter, poet, and troubadour. I refer, of course, to my friend St. John Hunt. St. John, welcome to the War Room.
Thanks, Roger, very much for having me. And yes, everything you said was true. So I'm happy to be on your show.
Now, thank you. Now, I know that you had millions of viewers only a little while ago when you were on with Alex Jones, but I could not resist the opportunity to have you join me. We're going to take it a little bit differently because you and I have co-authored a terrific book called The Bush Crime Family, now out in paperback and available at Amazon or Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, soon to be available on the Infowars.com store site. And this is the definitive biography of the entire Bush family. Many people are unaware of the fact that the family patriarch Prescott Bush made the initial family fortune by financing the armament of the Third Reich, by arming the Nazi war regime, and that federal regulators seized his bank, Union Bank, for treasonous activities during the run-up to the financing of Hitler's war machine. And I think a lot of people don't know that the 1992 JFK Records Release Act, which was signed into law, ironically, by President George H.W. Bush, who felt that he had little choice because of the public clamor that had been caused by Oliver Stone's great movie, JFK, and the earlier revelations of the House Assassinations Committee. Bush essentially signed into law a law that would turn around and expose him as having lied about his whereabouts on November 26, 1963, lied about where he was the day before, lied about where he was the day after, and then, incredibly, said for 30 years he could not remember where he was the day John Kennedy was killed. So we have a terrific piece of scholarship in the Bush crime family, but few men know the actual secrets of the Kennedy assassination in the way St. John Hunt does. If you would, recap the experience with your father at the time of his life that he is literally has one foot in the grave. He is on his deathbed, and that is when you and Alex Jones shock the world with what you learn.
Well, that's very true, Roger. It was very late in my father's life, and he was very near death. He'd had a lot of complications with pneumonia. He had gangrene in his leg, which had been amputated and worked on 2 different times. And but there was a little bit of fight left in him. His mind was very clear. His body was failing him, but his mind was strong. And he wanted to set the record straight. I must take some credit for prompting him to do so. In the last year or two of his life, there had been many accusations against my father saying that he was a participant in the JFK assassination, and I wanted to know if that was true or not. I mean, I felt that I could reach my father on a level that very few other people could. In other words, he's been compelled to answer that question in front of the Senate and the Congress, and he denied it all those times. But when it was just him and I by the hospital bed that he was laying in, he unraveled a story to me about his prior knowledge of the JFK assassination. And this, to me, was a monumental thing that he did. It wasn't out of guilt. I must clear this up. He didn't feel guilty about having prior knowledge or being involved in the JFK assassination. He was proud of his actions. He truly and deeply felt that John F. Kennedy was a threat to national security, and as did many, certainly many others in the industrial complex, the military-industrial complex. Johnson certainly felt Jack Kennedy was a threat on many levels. So he laid out this information, and we talked about a lot of things. We talked about some of the files that had been taken from him during Watergate, and his blackmailing of Richard Nixon, these information that he had that was just political dynamite, as Bob Woodward described in his book about the contents of his safe. So it was a very long and secretive process that my father and I embarked on to get to the root of the matter. And he passed away before the entire story could be told, but he did tell me enough, and I did as he wished, which was to release the information to the press as best as I could after he passed away. And within 2 months of his death, I succeeded in getting Rolling Stone magazine to unleash the information. Of course, it was passed up by the mainstream media. That was no surprise. But to those that want the truth and know the truth, I feel that my dad was very brave in revealing to me that he had prior knowledge and that he was involved, as he put it, a bench warmer in the assassination attempt. And that started the whole show for me, as far as trying to understand what the parameters of my father's responsibilities within the JFK assassination were. And I'm hoping with the release of these files in just a short amount of time, I think, Wednesday at midnight or Thursday at midnight, they have 400 pages on E. Howard Hunt. And I don't know if that's a lot compared to other persons in the files, but to me, I'm excited about seeing what's in those files. Because I think it was things in those files that my mother was taken to Chicago, which caused her death. So it's going to be very, very revealing to me, and I'm excited, but I'm nervous about it too.
Well, for those of you who are not familiar, St. John's Hunt Dorothy, about his mother, kind of a companion book to his first book, which was really about his father and the effect of Watergate on his family. Dorothy is a terrific book. Welcome back. I'm Roger Stone. You're here at the War Room, and we're joined by the writer, researcher, troubadour, Renaissance man, St. John Hunt, who I confess right up front is one of my closest friends and a man that I greatly admire. St. John, I am interested in clearing up a little confusion. According to the Associated Press, the document dump mandated by President Donald Trump for full disclosure from the JFK assassination files is said to include your father's super secret diaries. Again, I'm quoting them. There is some belief that L. Patrick Gray, who was the FBI director briefly under Nixon at the height of the Watergate cover-up, burned documents, books that belonged to your father, and it was thought by some that those had been the legendary Hunt diaries. I now believe that what was burned during Watergate must have been an operational notebook for Watergate, and that the deepest secrets of E. Howard Hunt, the secrets that he pulled the curtain up on in his deathbed discussions with you, may well be memorialized in these documents that the president has just ordered released.
Yes, I agree with you, Roger. It's well known that L. Patrick Gray burned two tablets, notebooks that were taken from my father's personal safe in the old executive office building the day after the Watergate burglary team had been arrested by John Dean's orders and given to L. Patrick Gray, who kept them till Christmas that December, and then he burned them. Those were operational notebooks in regards to the various operations and missions that my father had undertaken in his role as the leader of the plumbers, the Special Investigation Unit for the White House, for Richard Nixon. But the real secretive stuff was, I believe, there was copies that my mother had, which would account for the tremendous pressure that Nixon felt that Hunt had over him. You can hear President Nixon on the White House tapes ranting and raving about Hunt. He knows too much, and open that scab, and it's going to make a lot of people look bad. It's going to make the CIA look bad. It's going to blow open the whole Bay of Pigs thing, which in later volumes by Haldeman and by Woodward and Bernstein, it was a way that Richard Nixon referred to the JFK assassination. He referred to it as the Bay of Pigs thing, because it was all related to that. And I believe that in these files, we may just find what it was that my father had on Richard Nixon, which I believe was Richard Nixon's knowledge of the fact that many members of the anti-Castro assassination squad that my father was involved with and that Nixon approved during his tenure as vice president would come to light, would show that President Nixon was aware that these same assassins had turned their guns from Castro to President Kennedy, and I think that's the least of what we could hope to find in these files, if they are in fact the real files.
I think you've just put your finger on it. We now know what E. Howard Hunt knew, which is that the Central Intelligence Agency had teamed up with the mob in an effort to whack Fidel Castro. Why? When Castro took power in Cuba, all of the known assets of the intelligence agencies were expelled. But because the organized crime families still owned casinos in operation in Cuba, they still had people on the ground, people who could collect intelligence about the Castro regime. There's no doubt whatsoever, as Vice President of the United States, that Richard Nixon green-lighted this effort put together by Robert Mayu, formerly of the FBI, and elements of organized crime, including Carlos Marcello, Sam Giancana, and others, to kill Fidel Castro. And the thought was that perhaps that some blowback was responsible for the resultant killing of John Kennedy. Now, in my book, The Making of the President, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, the case against LBJ, I argue that you had multiple institutions who had individual motives for the replacement of John Kennedy. The Central Intelligence Agency upset about the Bay of Pigs and the Cuban Missile Crisis. The organized crime upset because they had financed John Kennedy's election. But the Attorney General of the Kennedy administration, Robert Kennedy, was seeking to deport Carlos Marcello and Santo Trafficante in violation of a deal they felt they had made with Ambassador Joseph Kennedy when they gave him $1 million to aid in the election of Jack Kennedy. And then, of course, there's big Texas Oil. They were unhappy about Kennedy's efforts to repeal the oil depletion allowance. E. Howard Hunt, it seems to me, told us two incredibly important things. One, the assassination was a CIA operation. He was on the ground there himself, although, as he put it, a backbencher. And the most important thing he told you, LBJ was running the show. That is, of course, the theme of my book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy. And I consider E. Howard Hunt one of the foremost authorities on what really happened that day. St. John, I thank you very much for joining us. I know that you had a great interview with Alex Jones. You are a great patriot, and just keep on writing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Roger. It's great to be being seen with you.